Put your finger into a newborn's palm. You don't have to ask. You don't have to wait. The finger's close around your finger, and then they hold. Historical reports found that this grip could briefly support a newborn's body weight. And nobody can tell you for certain what it is for. This is ancient you. Today, a reflex newborns typically arrive with, whose purpose has been argued about for 135 years and is still not settled. The response has a name: the palmar grasp reflex. Stroke the palm of a newborn, and the fingers flex around whatever touched them. The clinical description calls it a primitive, prehensile, involuntary response to a mechanical stimulus. It arrives long before the baby does. It can be pulled out of premature infants as early as 25 weeks. A baby who is still months away from being born can already produce the reflex. And it comes in two parts, which is the detail most people miss. First, the fingers close. Then they cling. Those are the actual terms in the literature. Closure, and then clinging. Two separate movements. The baby is not deciding to hold on. This particular response is involuntary. In 1891, an English doctor called Lewis Robinson decided to find out how strong that grip really was. He gave newborn babies something to hold, his own finger, or a small stick 3/4 of an inch across. Then he took away everything underneath them. He wrote that he had records of upward of 60 cases in which the children were under a month old, and that in at least half of those the experiment was tried within an hour of birth. In every instance, he wrote, with only 2 exceptions, the child was able to hang on and sustain the whole weight of its body for at least 10 seconds. He does not say what those 2 did instead. He does not give an exact number of babies either. Upward of 60 is as precise as he ever gets. When the babies were about 4 days old, Robinson found the strength had increased, and that nearly all of them could sustain their weight for half a minute. One infant of 3 weeks old held on for 2 minutes and 35 seconds. And there is one more line in his report worth reading exactly as he wrote it. A curious point, he says, is that in many cases no sign of distress is evinced and no cry uttered until the grasp begins to give way. That is all he claims. He does not say the babies were calm, and neither will I. He says most of them did not cry until they started to slip. Now, the honest part. This was not a modern controlled study, and Robinson did not report an exact sample size. But it is not a story that was told once and never checked. In 1940, at Columbia University, a developmental psychologist called Myrtle McGraw published a paper on exactly this, suspension grasp behavior in the human infant. She opened it with the question that still has no settled answer. Why should the newborn baby be capable of a striking performance which for him has no recognized utility? And about Robinson's evolutionary explanation, she wrote that it has never been impressively challenged or refuted. Not refuted is not the same as demonstrated. That distinction runs through the rest of this video. Somewhere in the first year, the grip goes away. Try the same thing on an adult and nothing happens. Stroke a grown-up's palm and the hand just lies there. There is a second version of the reflex in the feet, and its schedule is different. Press just behind a newborn's toes, and they curl around your finger the same way. But the foot version outlasts the hand version. The palmar grip usually fades by about 6 months. The plantar one keeps going to about 12. If it persists past 12 months, the clinical reference notes it may interfere with the development of standing and walking. So the hands let go first, and the feet carry on for roughly another 6 months. So where does the grip go when it goes? Here I have to be careful, because this is where the popular version of this story overreaches, and I am not going to repeat it. There is one measurement that gets quoted constantly. In an adult patient who had developed a grasp reflex after a lesion in the cerebral hemisphere, doctors stimulated the median and ulnar nerves directly, electrically, at the wrist, and the grasp came back 40 milliseconds later. 40 milliseconds is very fast. Too fast, the argument goes, for a loop that runs all the way up to the cerebral cortex and back. So the reflex is thought to be mediated at the level of the spinal cord. Notice what that does and does not establish. It says this particular response can be produced by a short circuit through the cord. It does not say that touching a baby's palm sends nothing to the brain. It was not even the same stimulus. That was electricity applied to a nerve trunk at the wrist, not a finger stroking a palm. And on the larger question, the current clinical reference is blunt. The precise neural circuit mapping of the grasp reflex, it says, has not been characterized. So, a fast spinal route is likely part of it. The full wiring diagram does not exist. What is much better established is that the reflex does not get deleted. The review by Futaji and colleagues puts it this way: the reflexes are only inhibited and not lost after the infantile period. Where the inhibition comes from is a different matter. Several regions have been proposed: premotor cortex, supplementary motor cortex, cingulate motor cortex, the frontal lobes. And studies that tried to pin it down precisely, in the reference's own words, have yielded inconsistent results. So the honest picture is not a switch, and it is not one part of the brain pressing a button. It is a spinal mechanism that is held under control by something in the brain that has not been fully identified, and that control can be disturbed. That leaves the question of where the reflex came from. Many primates are born able to hold on to their mother. In a lot of monkey and ape species, the infant grips her fur from birth and stays attached while she moves and climbs. Researchers watching infant monkeys a day or two old described them slung beneath the mother's belly, holding on with their hands and feet alone, receiving no support from her, staying attached while she jumped from bough to bough. And when the palmar grasp reflex was tested in 5 infant monkeys, they hung by one hand for somewhere between 7 and 33 minutes. 7 minutes at the low end. The strongest baby Robinson ever recorded managed 2.5. Human infants are different, but be careful how you say it, because Robinson's whole experiment shows a newborn human can grip hard enough to hold its own weight. The difference is what happens in real life. In most human societies, infants do not travel by holding on to their mother. She carries them. And an adult human body has very little on it left to hold. That contrast is where the famous explanation comes from. The idea is that this grip is what remains of an ancestral clinging response from a time when an infant had to hold on to a furred mother. It is a hypothesis. It has been around since Robinson named his article Darwinism in the Nursery. McGraw said in 1940 that it had never been impressively challenged. It has also never been demonstrated. A 2012 review describing this reading says the grasp reflex could be regarded as a rudiment of phylogenetic functions. Could be regarded, not is. I am telling you this because it is an interpretation that modern reviews still mention. I am not telling you it is settled, because it isn't. There is a second reflex people always bring up here, and it is in worse shape than the first. Take away the support under a newborn's head and the arms fly outward, away from the body, and then swing back in. Ernst Moro described it in 1918 and thought the meaning was obvious. He called it the embracing reflex, and to make his case, he drew a baby orangutan clinging to its mother. The problem is the ending. The arms come back in, but the hands finish open. Nothing is gripped. A 2012 review states that the phylogenetic meaning of this reflex remains unclear. In 2017, a different group argued it is not a grab at all, but a signal, a newborn asking to be picked up. So the Moro reflex has no settled explanation either. The reflex also appears in adults, and there it means something else. In 1927, 2 neurologists, Adey and Critchley, published an analysis of 13 patients who had a grasp reflex, an adult grasp reflex, which is rare in healthy adults, and who had a tumor or a vascular lesion in one frontal lobe. The reflex appeared on the side opposite the damaged lobe. They did not find the reflex in 13 random patients. They collected 13 patients who already had it and looked at what their brains had in common. The reflex comes back on the standard account because injury to the higher center removes the cortical inhibition and releases it. The spinal mechanism was never removed. It was being held. The numbers are worth hearing. Among healthy adults over 65, the grasp reflex is estimated at about 1 in 1,000. Among people over 65 with mild cognitive impairment, roughly 1 in 60. With dementia, close to 1 in 5. And in one condition it can go the other way. In a study of 147 patients with normal pressure hydrocephalus, a treatable buildup of fluid in the brain, about half had the reflex. 72 of them were reassessed a year after shunt surgery. In that group, the reflex weakened in 42%, and in another 31% it stayed exactly as it was. That is worth stating carefully, because it is often quoted as a single figure of 72%. 72% is the two groups added together, the ones who improved and the ones who did not change, and it describes only the patients who were reassessed, not the whole 147. There is also a question of where in the brain this comes from. You will often see the adult grasp reflex assigned to one specific patch of the frontal lobe, the supplementary motor area. In 1992, Renzi and Barbieri examined 491 consecutive neurological admissions and found grasping in 8% of them. Within that group, among the patients whose damage reached the medial areas of the brain, grasping showed up in 70%, and it was always associated with damage to the cingulate gyrus, while the supplementary motor cortex was, in their words, less consistently encroached upon. That is a finding about one subgroup of one study. It is enough to say the tidy single area answer is doubtful. It is not enough to replace it with a different tidy single area answer. They also reported something that undercuts the drama. In most of their patients, the grasping was not a forced phenomenon. It could be modified by will, and it came straight back as soon as the patient's attention was diverted. So here is what you can actually say about the thing in your hand. It is real, it is measurable, and it is typically present in newborns. Robinson reported that most infants in his series briefly supported their own weight. It fades within the first year. It is not deleted. It is held down by something in the brain we have not finished mapping, and it can return when that something is damaged. And the reason it exists at all is still an open question. The oldest answer we have is that it is what is left of holding on to a mother's fur. Modern reviews still present that as a possible interpretation, not as an established function. Put your finger in a newborn's palm and the hand will close. We know that it closes. We do not yet know what it is closing for.